So Missouri defensive tackle Michael Sam came out of the closet this week, and it's produced a lot of discussion about what the implications are for the NFL and for Michael Sam's future and so forth. And for me, it brings up an important point, an important rule of social progress, which is that when people in positions of leadership and authority and power exercise that authority with good judgment and goodwill, social change is readily possible. When they don't exercise those positions well or try to block or sabotage social change, it can easily lead to chaos and dysfunction. So the implication of that idea for Michael Sam is that if he finds himself on a team with a strong front office, with good leadership, where the inmates are not running the asylum, where the management knows what's going on the team, they will make every effort to make Michael Sam's entry into the NFL a positive one. If he winds up on a team with a weak and vacillating leadership, like the Miami Dolphins, for example, it's almost impossible to imagine the Jonathan Martin, Richie Incognito scenario playing out on a team like the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots are all business, and if they are aware of something that looks like it's undermining the team effort, they would nip it in the bud in a moment. So it all depends on the circumstance that Michael Sam finds himself in. If the leadership is strong and good, he's going to be in a good position to excel in the NFL. And I thought I would kind of underscore this point by looking at some examples of social change that were outside the NFL as a way of kind of underscoring what may happen within the NFL. First example I'd like to bring up, important example of social change, is Harry Truman integrating the armed forces in 1948. When he signed that executive order in 1948 desegregating the armed forces, a lot of the leadership of the military did not go along with him. They did not support the policy. But President Truman, on the other hand, was steadfast. And when General Omar Bradley walked into the Oval Office and defied Truman and said, "Mr. President, this is a bad policy. You're doing this too soon," Truman basically said to him, sit down, shut up, get on board, or get out of the military. He wasn't going to suffer any fools about this issue. When Truman's Secretary of the Army, Kenneth Royall, a year later in 1949, was still opposing the policy of integrating the Army, Truman fired him. If you weren't on board with this policy, he was going to find somebody that would promote his policy. Now, it did take some years, 52, 53, for the policy to be fully implemented, but it would have been a lot more chaotic, a lot more difficult, and a lot slower, but for the strong leadership of Harry Truman. Now, in the final example I want to bring up, we're now getting back to football. Darrell Hill was the first African-American player for the University of Maryland in 1962. He was a wide receiver, and a very good one. But Maryland, of course, played in the Atlantic Coast Conference, which meant that at some point Maryland was going to have to go down and play on Tobacco Road, play at Clemson, play at Wake Forest, play at Duke, at North Carolina. And in 1962, these were places that were not favorable to black athletes. In fact, when Darrell Hill joined Maryland, Clemson threatened to withdraw from the Atlantic Coast Conference, saying that they would refuse to play against a black player. And here's a little quote from the Clemson coach, whose name was Frank Howard. "They can make us admit these Negroes, but they can't make me play them on my team. Nor will we play against teams that with Negroes or let them set foot in our football stadium. So this was a big bluff on his part because, well, they weren't going to withdraw from the Atlantic Coast Conference. Their association with it was too valuable. But nobody was quite sure what would happen when Maryland went down to play Clemson. So when it happened, Maryland was there. Clemson decided grudgingly that it would play the game. But during the warm-up before the game, a problem arose because Darrell Hill's mother had bought a ticket for the game and had driven down to watch the game. The stadium would not recognize her ticket and allow her to enter the stadium. So at some point before the game started, Darrell Hill, his young man at the time, is very concerned about his mom. And he made a decision. I'm going to leave this game. If I'm not convinced that my mother is in a safe place, and if I'm not sure of her well-being, I'm not going to play this game. And he was just about to leave the game and go look after his mom. Well, at exactly the same moment, the president of Clemson heard of what was going on. Quickly, he sized up the situation and realized this could be a public relations disaster. He went down, found Darrell Hill's mother, and invited her to watch the football game from his box, the president's box. And what could have been an incredible national incident was smoothed over by the wisdom and the judgment of the president of Clemson. Later in the year, however, they had to go down and play Wake Forest, and that was not going to be a picnic either. Again, they were in pregame warm-ups. Darrell Hill was out in the field catching passes, and the student section in particular for Wake Forest was relentless in its abuse of Darrell Hill, screaming obscenities and racial epithets at him. This had been going on for a while, and eventually what happened was the captain of the Wake Forest team walked out onto the field, walked up to Darrell Hill, and put his arm around him, and walked him to the center of the field facing the Wake Forest student section. The student section, of course, who were all focused on Darrell Hill, took notice of this. And a hush fell over the crowd because there they were standing shoulder to shoulder in a show of solidarity. And the captain of the team probably didn't change anybody's mind that day. But this display in the center of the field shamed them into silence at that point. And at that point, everything quieted down, and they went on and played the game. Now you might ask, well, who was this captain? Who was the person who was courageous enough to do this? The captain of Wake Forest in 1962 was Brian Piccolo, who we now know as the celebrated character figure from the movie Brian's Song. Subsequent to playing at Wake Forest, he went on to play for the Chicago Bears, became the best friend of Gale Sayers, and eventually died at the age of 26 from cancer. But he's left an enormous legacy because his life was filled with acts like the one that he made on that day with Darrell Hill. So I come back to my original point. What this means for Michael Sam is something very positive, because now that his sexual orientation is out, now that everyone knows it, it's very unlikely that a team will draft Michael Sam that doesn't have a strong front office, a strong management, and a strong leadership style. If you're going to draft Michael Sam, it means that you're prepared to do everything necessary for him to succeed. If you're not on board with Michael Sam's sexual orientation, you're probably not going to draft him in the first place. So wherever he winds up, it's probably going to be a good place for him. Now, does that mean that Michael Sam is going to go on and become a Hall of Fame player? No, I have no idea. What it means is that he will have every opportunity, probably, on the team that drafts him, to excel and show what he can do in the NFL. So if there's a stock offered for Michael Sam, I'm buying that stock because I think he'll probably wind up at a good team with a good front office and with strong leadership. And that means he'll be able to show what he can do in the NFL. I'm Jeff Rowan. See you next time.